start with the premise that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And again, every presentation, every article, blog that you see about DevOps, regardless of its source, whether it's coming from an automation provider or it's coming from someone who's been in the space for a while, or it's coming from any of the thought leaders in the space, there's a common thread that says that cultural considerations are a critical success factor for DevOps, much more so than even your strategies, right? Until we get an organizational culture that really embraces and encourages innovation, automation, being able to break down and cross some of the silos that have been built through IT over several decades of growth. And you have to remember, we're a fairly young industry compared to some other spaces within corporate enterprises such as accounting, right? We're a pretty young industry, and so our cultural growth has shaped how we're able to perform today. And as you all know, how we're required to perform today is fast and furious. So culture is as much, if not more, of a strategic consideration than some of your business plans. And Peter Drucker, I think, really nailed it with this quote. So if we're going to talk about organizational culture, we certainly should give it a little bit of a definition. And so from the Business Dictionary, I particularly like this definition because I think it describes the way you, your colleagues, your bosses, and perhaps your teams start to interact with each other. Organizational culture are the values and behaviors that contribute to the unique social and psychological environment of an organization, right? Social and psychological, those are two very, very powerful words. When you come to work every day, whether you're like me and you work from home and you interact virtually, or you go to the office and you see your colleagues across the hall or across from your office, there is a very, very unique social and psychological environment that's specific to your organization. And that's evolved as your organization has evolved. So if you're a young organization, as we see with some of what we call the unicorn organizations, they've almost built a DevOps mentality into their corporate DNA. They grew up with a collaborative, communicative, automation-based culture. If you come from some of the organizations that I come from, a lot of that culture grew over time, and because we're an organization of subject matter experts, sometimes the psychological and social aspects, the culture that's associated with an organization is more unique to the silo than it is to the enterprise. And that becomes either an enabler or a constraint, depending on how you look at it, in terms of bringing something as fast and collaborative as DevOps into your organization. This is another great quote from Lloyd Taylor. You can't directly change culture, but you can change behavior, and behavior will become culture, right? You can't surgically remove your existing culture and then surgically attach a new one. This is about people, and people adapt to change. They adapt to new ways of thinking and working and interacting based on their own experiences and based on their social and psychological perspective of the organization. So culture can be as complex as you want it to be or as simple as you want it to be, because again, we're dealing with human beings and how human beings behave and think and perform work. In fact, if you start to look at how culture shapes our organizations, it's very influential in terms of how people think, feel, interact, and behave at work. Right? So it isn't just how they think about their organization or they think about their job or they think about their colleagues. It's also how innovative their thought processes are, how they're encouraged to think outside the box, a cliche that's really risen over many, many years. It's how they feel, and feel could be pride, it could be frustration, it could be accomplishment, it could be success, but there's a lot of emotion that goes into your work environment. It's also how they interact with others, inside and outside of their silos, inside and outside of their teams. The word squad has emerged as a kind of a cool term in DevOps, and all of that contributes to how they behave. Right? So, if you search back in your own personal history, and I won't necessarily share my personal history, I've had organizations that very much encouraged innovative thinking and emotionally gave me a great deal of pride and sense of accomplishment in what I was doing. And my interaction with my colleagues was, was very positive and very productive, and we helped each other be successful. And that very much shaped the way I behaved. And again, if you go back in your history, there might be a few that maybe didn't encourage you as much, or you would have liked to have the culture perhaps shape you and your growth and your team's growth in a different way. So culture is very, very influential in terms of how we behave. And if we start to look at DevOps and the whole cultural transformation that's associated with DevOps, and a lot of it is cultural transformation, it's not just all about automation, then that does define why it's a critical success factor. So unfortunately, for those of you who are Game of Thrones fans, you might recognize this map. In many cases, IT's current culture is the Seven Kingdoms, right? So we, above all other units within a corporate enterprise, we love our frameworks. We do. And in IT, if you start to look again at the pockets of framework loyalty within your organization, certainly we have Agile on the development side, and we have security with today's rising security threats, and automation. Our usual go-to place is to buy a tool, and now continuous integration and continuous delivery/deployment. And then across the narrow sea, we have ITIL and ITSM and organizations that have invested quite a lot in that. And then we have this new continent that's just risen out of the, out of the dark, called DevOps. And so we start to look at the Seven Kingdoms. Unfortunately, we have also kind of given rise to the fact that each of these kingdoms want to sit on the Iron Throne. And if you're not a Game of Thrones fan, the Iron Throne is what's going to rule all. And Westeros, in this case, is the business. So we start to look at current culture, and the current cultures maybe aren't necessarily at war with each other, but there is definitely a battle for funding and resourcing and vocabulary and culture, where each of these kingdoms are shaping some of the organizational culture within IT's own organization. So we don't want to be the Seven Kingdoms, right? We don't want to have loyalties to our frameworks. We want to have loyalties to our business, right? And we want to certainly have loyalties to our mutual success. And I think that's at the heart of the definition of DevOps. So what's the root cause of cultural fails? I would say the number one root cause is that we have language barriers. Within each of these frameworks, or within each of these kingdoms, we do have customized and unique vocabulary. So our acronyms, our terminologies, our use of terms that either come from our tools, come from our frameworks, really prevent us from being able to cross them over into a different silo, because we don't necessarily speak the same language, and our knowledge is tribal, right? We contain the knowledge within our community, whatever that community may be. It may be your team, it may be your line management, it may be your region, but we contain both the vocabulary. And I'm not talking about cultural vocabulary. I'm not talking a global space where we don't speak the same language. I'm very much giving rise to an IT sense of vocabulary, right? Our glossaries are not the same glossaries. So we have tribal knowledge and we have independent glossaries. And so the result of that is poor communication. We don't speak the same language. We don't necessarily work on the same aspects of projects or software delivery. And so the net result of that is thick silos, right? Silos where, in order to be able to navigate across the spectrum of IT, and your IT may be internal IT, there may be managed service providers, outsources, cloud providers that all participate in your supply chain, those silos can be fairly thick. And within those thick silos, we've also defined our own processes. So not only do we have unique language, we may have unique process. And even if those processes are called the same thing, such as configuration management, right? Configuration management in development is very different than configuration management in IT service management. So we have not only different languages, we not only have these silos, but we have processes that seem to want to accomplish the same thing, but are not done in collaboration or coordination with each other. We don't choose our tools together, so we may have incompatible automation. And within DevOps and the focus on pipelines or tool chains that are starting to create this kind of fast delivery of software, the automation may not necessarily be compatible. You know, they call DevOps the rise of the API for just that reason, because the automation needs to be able to be interoperable. And then finally, from a people perspective, we're not necessarily good at collaboration. We're good at collaboration within our teams. So however your team is made up, and your team may be specifically developers or specifically operational folks and specifically security folks, even the cross-functional teams sometimes don't necessarily know how to collaborate with each other. And if you want to know the difference between communication and collaboration, I'll make that very easy for you. In communication, the information is passed in a single channel, right? I tell you something, you tell me something back, right? So it may only be one way. I communicate to you that we have changes going on. It may be two-way. I communicate changes going on. You communicate back, perhaps that you have additional changes, or there's some other things that are going on. But in collaboration, I actually ask your opinion. And that's a very, very important cultural difference, right? When we collaborate, I will ask you, or one team will ask another team, what do you think, right? What are your ideas? Right, so it's more than just a two-way sense of communication. True collaboration allows input and feedback and questioning, right, and debate within either different teams or within the same team or across the IT spectrum. You can't automate creativity, right? You can cage it within your thick organizational silos. So while we would like to say that automation is our go-to place, not necessarily so, right? But we can keep that creativity so trapped within our siloed cages that sense of creativity, that sense of being able to bring additional business value doesn't transcend beyond just whatever team or silo that we're working in. And again, if you look at the rise of agile software development as a great example of that, you know, agile software development and ITSM sort of grew up at the same time, but they didn't cross-pollinate. So we had developers that were going off and learning everything they could about Scrum and starting to stand up Scrum teams and starting to do sprints and backlogs and retrospectives and you know, within 2 weeks trying to deliver something that was done. And on the opposite side of that fence, we had IT service management, you know, trying to stand up change control and starting to introduce configuration management and trying to improve the performance of some of the operational processes like incident problem or service level management. And so what ended up happening is both sides had a lot of creativity in terms of what they were trying to achieve. But again, after a 2-week or 4-week sprint, the software development team may produce some type of iteration, and then downstream it took months for it to go into production, and then the production processes weren't prepared for it. So again, we've not collaborated well. We've done some really good stuff, right? We've done Agile and we've done ITSM and we've introduced a lot of automation. We just haven't done it together. So the net result of that has been something that we've coined the term cultural debt. Many of you are familiar with the term technical debt, where in favor of moving faster, we leave some of the technical considerations behind to be worked on a different day. And then technical debt starts to grow and grow and grow, and sooner or later you have to address that. Well, cultural debt is exactly the same thing, right? We defer or disregard cultural considerations in favor of growth and innovation. And you start to look at the rise of IT, and I said I've been in IT a pretty long time. And so because of the way IT grew, where we might have started out as a homogeneous mainframe environment and then graduated to client-server environments where we had hundreds of servers, and then, you know, cloud and web services and certainly SaaS-based apps and on-premises apps started to rise. Within our own culture, we grew lines of similar expertise. You may call them a silo, right, that were managed by people that had that level of expertise and understood the vocabulary. And in some cases, we left behind, deferred, or disregarded some of the cultural considerations because we needed to have the same expertise perform within that same team. Excuse me. In today's very fast-paced world where technology has integrated in just about every aspect of our personal and professional life, we need to now look at how do we address that cultural debt and how do we move forward from there. So I want to introduce the concept of a continuous people pipeline. As I said at the beginning of today's presentation, we have looked at continuous delivery, right, where being able to get to a staging environment and have the ability to press a button and instantly deploy, or continuous deployment where the actual deployment doesn't require the press of a button, and we look at continuous integration where developers are developing separately and then committing their work to an integration server at least once daily. And so, you know, continuous testing and continuous security, and of course on the operational side, continuous operations. One of the things that might have been overlooked is the need for continuous people. Because in each of those stages of the delivery pipeline or the deployment pipeline, or however we're going to go from idea to value, there are people, there are teams, there are individuals, there are managers, there are suppliers, there are cloud environments. And so sometimes when we start to look at frameworks like this, the people aspect is not overlooked, but it's assumed. And we don't really look at building this pipeline of how do people interact, how do they collaborate. Remember I said before, collaboration is allowing for input and feedback, and I ask your opinion and you share your knowledge. How do we create a continuous people pipeline that really underpins all of the other pipelines within DevOps? So here's your classic deployment pipeline, right? So in a classic deployment pipeline, we have a team of people that are developing, and then they may commit to an integrated continuous integration server, and then from there the combined commits are built and they're tested and then potentially deployed. And there are hundreds of APIs that are built to be able to interact within these tools. And if you look at the bottom part of this slide, you can see the different stages of the continuous deployment pipeline, which really lay at the heart of DevOps. And, you know, the list of tools that are there are shifting and shaping, and new tools are being introduced, and some of these tools are being acquired by other tool providers. So the names of the actual tools are really insignificant in this regard. But to recognize that when we go through the different stages of the deployment pipeline, we do look at it from an automation perspective. And automation is absolutely a critical aspect of DevOps. We very much want to leverage automation as much as we can. And we want to be able to build those APIs so that this non-homogeneous set of tools can act like a homogeneous suite, right? In the old days, you might have gone to a provider and bought a suite that had an assumption of interoperability. In this case, you start to look at these tools, and they're not necessarily built to be interoperable. It is the APIs that take us between it. Again, very classic vision of what continuous delivery and continuous deployment looks like. But here's the reality, right? It is all about people, process, and automation. For those of you with an IT service management background, you know, we used to call it PPT, right? People, process, and technology. We've adapted that slightly because automation goes beyond just this concept of technology. We really are automating process that sits below it. But again, let's not focus on that. Let's focus on the top layer, right? There are people that are driving those cogs, right? There are people that are writing those APIs. There are people that are designing and engineering and architecting pipelines and tool chains. Excuse me. So while, again, every image you may see about continuous delivery or continuous deployment really speaks to the tool sets that sit under each of these stages, there are human beings in your organization and in your supply chain that are bringing ideas forward and that are designing and architecting, and I think most importantly are serving to improve, right? Automation may be self-healing, but it's not necessarily you know, part of self-improvement, and we definitely need people for that. And we don't need individuals in individual stages. We need that interoperable set of human interactions and skills in order to be able to do that. Excuse me. So Jez Humble, who's the author of the Continuous Delivery book, has a great quote. Let the computers do the boring and repetitive tasks, and let's let people solve problems and focus on high-value activities. So you might have heard the term no ops, right? So no ops, many of us see as no jobs. That's not true. It's really new ops. And in new ops, people are engaged to be able to do what only people can do, which is to be creative, which is to solve problems, excuse me, and to focus on high-value activities. So when we talk about automation in DevOps, one of the things we're really looking to achieve is consistency across the automation tool chains, but more importantly, we're looking to free up the human beings to do what only human beings can do. Excuse me. So we have a lot of machine learning. I mean, that's been a term that's been floating around. Apologies. So, that's been a term that's been floating around, machine learning, where, machines can be self-improving and they can be self-healing. And that's all great, but still will never replace the capacity of the human brain. And I think as important, will never replace the ability of human beings to share ideas and to work together towards innovation. So let's let the machines do those boring, repetitive tasks. And if you come from a highly regulated environment, there's a lot of concerns about DevOps in a regulated environment. The computers are doing the repetitive tasks consistently if the plans that they're built upon are built by human beings with governance, risk, and compliance built into them. APIs, not just for tools. We really do need to think about application people interfaces between the various teams and the various individuals that make up the deployment pipeline. As I said before, there are real people that are doing development, and there are real people that are doing the builds, right? Even if the build is automated, there are real people that have to sit behind those builds in order to be able to author the automation. And there are real people that are involved in testing, whether you're a test-driven developer, whether you're a security professional, whether you're QA. There are real people that are either doing the testing or authoring the test plans. And there are real people that are managing releases, even if you're leveraging the capability of release automation. And then there are real people that are supporting, deploying, spinning up infrastructure, providing incident and problem management, and taking that into post-production support. And I will tell you now that the face of operations, particularly from release management forward, and for those of you that have an IT service management background, the processes that might have in ITIL been confusing or perhaps under-focused. I don't want to say undervalued, because I don't think there's a process that has been undervalued. But you look at processes like release management, which going back into the early days of ITIL was probably the most misunderstood process. And you look at new concepts like site reliability engineering, where automation and operations is critical, but the involvement of operational teams, whether that's availability or capacity or incident or problem management, and how those roles and those teams interact, some of it's the same and some of it's really different. But the underpinning processes and the underpinning humans that support those processes are still the same, right? They may be going faster, they may have different roles, they may have different responsibilities, but there still is a human chain that underpins the deployment pipeline. And we do need application people interfaces, call it whatever you want, right? We do need to be able to build those interactions, because unfortunately they're not necessarily intuitive, right? We don't necessarily assume that we know how to do that. We would like to. We don't necessarily assume that we know how to do that. So think about that as you're starting. Looking at the polling questions, some of you have really started to go down the DevOps track. Some of you are trying to figure out what DevOps looks like in your organization. And don't get stuck on the term DevOps, right? Don't get stuck on the term using DevOps, right? Because you're not really using it. You're starting to bring in cultural and automation and practices and integration of different frameworks That's all part of DevOps. But again, as part of that, there are people that understand different aspects of it. They understand the automation, they understand the frameworks, and being able to provide that level of human supply chain, right, is very, very critical to your ability to be successful. Again, I'm gonna get off my soapbox in a minute on this, but you can go by every single one of these tools and you still will not achieve what DevOps is promising to help you achieve, which is a faster flow of work from idea to value, right? If you start to look at the term no ops, which its origins were really based in the fact that organizations needed to automate as much of operations as possible, if you kind of spin that around to new ops, still people involved in that, right? So again, I think everybody on this call understands that, but to understand that more than just standing around and saying, yes, you know, we need a cultural transformation, or yes, we need to engage people. There are some very, very significant tangible things you can do to make that happen starting today, right? Starting today. And a lot of it is being able to share ideas and to be able to be innovative as well. So continuous engagement is critical, right? And we need to have people that, as I said before, can provide input and feedback. We also need people who can design pipelines, right, who are good architects of interoperability with many of these tools and understand how the role that each of these tools play within the pipelines and being able to go forward. We do need engineers who know how to configure the automation, not just a single piece of automation, but across the entire DevOps spectrum. We need individuals who can review test plans and author test plans and look at other output that comes from the automation as well. So, you know, there's now kind of a mantra that everyone in IT needs to learn how to test, and everyone in IT needs to learn some level of coding. So even if you're not the one that's going to write the test plan or execute the automation that's running the test, if you're, you know, at the end of the operations pipeline, you need to be able to read those test results. And you need to be able to certainly look at the code or be able to code some of your applications so that some of those consistent tasks can be automated. We absolutely need people who can design metrics, right? Because everything we've talked about up until this minute has been great, but unless we can measure the results, we can measure the return on the investment, we can measure the fact that we are going faster and we are delivering value to the business. And again, your tools may come with a bunch of canned metrics, but it's only people that can actually determine which metrics have business value. Only people can facilitate feedback loops. And if you've read the Phoenix Project, you'll know that one of the primary, one of the three ways is the ability to shorten feedback loops so that we can get that input, we can get that feedback, and we can move forward a lot faster. You know, and as I said before, only people can solve problems. Right? Machine learning is great, but this still does require a higher level of thinking that's associated with solving problems or exchanging ideas or being innovative. So this is not a message that, you know, you need people. This is a bigger message that you need people engaging people, and you do need a continuous people approach in order to be able to fully realize the benefits of DevOps. We don't want to build the processes and the pipelines in isolation. We don't want only developers to build their continuous integration approach, and we don't want only the release management teams or the release engineers to build the middle sections of, you know, build, test, and deploy as far as the continuous delivery pipeline goes. And we don't want only operational folks to be responsible for spinning up infrastructure or providing systems administration or ongoing support. We need to be able to do this together. Now, does that mean everybody has to attend every meeting or everyone has to be engaged in everything? Of course not. But the ability of continuous people engagement means that we leverage those competencies, and you're going to hear that word a lot. We're going to leverage those competencies, and we're going to groom those competencies in the people that can cross over the different silos or into the different teams or squads. You know, this could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship, right, where we start to break down not only the silos, but we do start to create common vocabularies, and we start to look at processes like configuration management or change management, release management, incident, problem management, service level management. I mean, I can name all of the ITSM processes. And we start to build shared accountability in the form of metrics, right? We all win together or we all improve together, but we don't start to look at, hey, my job is done, it's now up to you. We do start to look at how do we measure the entire success of IT as providing value to the business. On the left-hand side, I really like this kind of mantra of control without being controlling. If you start to look at the origins of ITIL and IT service management, for example, at the time that the last set of updates to ITIL was introduced, we were very much in a command and control mentality. There were regulatory requirements like Sarbanes-Oxley and HIPAA that were being introduced. We knew we needed to put more controls in place for security and for compliance. And so a lot of how we might have built our processes were built very much with a command and control mentality in place. But you can control without being controlling. And so part of what you need to do now is kind of, we all went big. Now we need to scale back to how much is just enough process. We don't discard any of the processes, and certainly are not encouraging the removal or the obsolescence of ITSM, but it is now looking at how much is just enough process in order to increase your flow, and maybe perhaps even looking at concepts like minimum viable process in order to be able to collect and collaborate those vocabularies, those processes, and their metrics. We need to be able to build trust. And I would tell you very honestly, and I'm sure that you've had good experiences with this and perhaps not so much, building trust between teams in an organization built on expertise, right? We each have very different levels of expertise within our teams and within our different lines of IT. So I'm not a developer. I'll never be a developer, right? So somebody trusting me as an operations person when they're a developer may not be easy, but we do have to trust each other's expertise and realize that each of the teams and each of the individuals provide competencies that enable IT to be commonly successful, right? To be totally successful as we go forward. So again, and then the final piece of it is here: talk to each other. Whether you talk to each other remotely, you use tools like this, you pass each other in the hallway, however that works, don't undervalue the art of conversation, because sometimes problems can be solved, innovation can be introduced, ideas can be exchanged just through a conversation. And that conversation, we used to say around the water cooler. I don't think that happens as much anymore. But, sometimes it happens just in really casual conversation and curiosity, right? My curiosity about how does a developer work, not how do they code, how do they work, right? What does their work day look like? And how do I understand what they're doing and how they're doing? Sometimes it's just a question, all right? So with that, I'm going to encourage you, let's go back one. I'm going to encourage you to really think about continual improvement. And so in IT service management, continual service improvement is not only one of the books, it is the heart of what we're trying to achieve when we start to look at managing services. And so if we start to look at process improvement, we start to look at value realization, start to look at the integration of Agile and Lean and service management and DevOps, the most important continuous of all is people, right? Because really only people have the ability to observe the landscape and start to be able to bring ideas forward in terms of how to improve. So on that note, Karen, I'm going to turn it back to you and say thank you all for spending some time with me today. Happy to take your questions and hope we have quite a few available to us.
Thank you, Jayne. That was a great presentation, so thank you. And at the moment, I don't have any questions, but I do have some things to announce to people while we are waiting for them to send in their questions. So one thing I'd like to say to you that I'd like to just remind everybody that our next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, April 20th, when Perry Stratham, SRE Squad Leader with IBM's Cloud DevOps Services, is going to join us. And Perry's presentation is titled Site Reliability Engineering, an Enterprise Adoption Story. And in this presentation, the IBM DevOps Services SRE team, and that's not the whole team, but it will be Perry and a couple of his colleagues, will give us a brief introduction to site reliability engineering, and then they're going to show us how they adopted its principles in their existing enterprise organization. So we hope that you can join us for that. And we will continue to bring you practitioner presentations discussing Agile and IT service management implementation experiences and challenges. So people want to hear and learn from the practitioner experience, right? You want to know what's working and what's not working for people. So if you have, if you would like to share your implementation experience with us or your challenges with us, or if you have a presentation that you think this audience would be interested in hearing from you, please let me know and we'll be happy to work with you and make that one of our monthly replications. And I believe that our colleague Eric Montijo is here with us today, Jayne, to share some information. Hello, Eric. Are you there?
Hi, Karen. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Good, good. I just wanted to take a second of everybody's time. If you're excited to learn more about the cultural, technical, and business benefits of Agile methodology, we'd like to invite you to a free workshop on March 31st called Minimum Viable ITSM. This workshop touches on taking your established ITSM processes and applies Agile to make them less complex, with faster delivery, all without sacrificing quality. To sign up and learn more, you can go to itsmacademy.com/MVITSM and use coupon code WEBMAR2017, that's WEBMAR 2017 at checkout. And don't worry, we're going to put this in the chat and make sure everybody gets this coupon code so they can sign up. We'd also like to remind everyone that ITSM Academy offers the best in Agile and DevOps training. Please be sure to check out our course catalog for Agile at itsmacademy.com/Agile. Passes are available if you need multiple courses. Let us know how we can help you with those 2017 training goals via chat on our website, email at info@itsmacademy.com, or phone at 954-491-3442. Don't forget, we are also offering DevOps Institute's new classes, and we'd love to see you in there very soon. We have the DTE coming out week of July 10th, Business Relationship Manager Professional, week of August 14th, and there's also a DOI webinar from the author on the week of Tuesday, March 28th. Oh, that's coming up real quick. So we'll be sure to send that registration link out to everyone as well. So that's all I have to say. And Jayne, thank you very much for coming out today and giving us some of your, I know you're a busy lady, so thanks for coming out and giving us this awesome webinar. So back to you, Karen.
All right, thank you for that promo, Eric. Appreciate that. Jayne, I want to tell you that Shauna is saying this was an excellent presentation and thank you so much. And she has a question for you, and she's saying, what is the best way to get leadership to understand the importance of the people part?
So that's a great question, Shauna, and thank you for that, because I think part of the challenges that organizations face in DevOps is kind of looking up and looking down, meaning, you know, DevOps does require certainly senior management and leadership support, and it also requires support from the ground up as well, which means the actual practitioners within IT and leadership. You know, it's kind of interesting. I think on the strategic level, there are many strategists, whether they're CIOs or senior managers, that are really starting to take the concept of DevOps very, very seriously. There's a layer of leadership that probably has some concerns, and that's usually what we call middle management. So looking at the people aspect and understanding how teams, I'm not going to speak so much at the strategic level, but how teams can start to interact really takes it down to the human level. So for example, you know, there's a concept in DevOps called beer ops, right, where we engage teams, not real beer, we'll call it root beer, but we have, you know, again, another cliche, but a great concept of the two pizza team, where you take two teams or representatives of two teams together and you bring in two pizzas, which means you only bring in enough people that can actually eat two pizzas. And so it's a containable group, if you know what I mean by that. And you start to see the leaders start to observe the interactions between the various teams and the and the vocabulary and you know, kind of moving before. You collaborate on tools. That part of the tool exploration, whether you're vetting new tools or looking at the capabilities of existing tools, leaders start to bring in members of different teams in order to be able to do that. Put an ops person on a Scrum team, right? Have, you know, encourage your leaders, particularly on the development and operational side, to encourage one operations person to join one Scrum team. And not only as an observer, that's really not a good spend of time, but as somebody who can do real work. Operational readiness can start to bring back earlier indications of the type of work that operations might need to do based on this feature or iteration that's being, or increment that's being built at the time. So there's lots of things that I think leaders can do, and most leaders want proof of concept as well as leap of faith. So hopefully, again, spend a lunchtime together and ask leaders to be able to observe the behaviors. Put an ops person on a Scrum team and have that ops person do real work and add real tasks to the sprint backlog and bring that back to an operational team. Have your automation architects, whether they're suppliers or engineers, internal or external, engage representatives of different phases of the deployment pipeline to get their input and feedback. And I think at some point, just do a pilot, right? Pick one sprint, pick one feature, pick one product, pick one business unit, and get a willing leader to be able to, again, operate a little bit on leap of faith and look for proof of concept and be able to move forward from there.
Thank you, Jayne. I just want to remind everybody that Eric did put in the information into your chat for the free seat in the Minimal Viable IT Service Management Workshop, so you can check there for that. And Shauna says thank you for that answer, Jayne.
Oh, my pleasure.
Terry has a question for you also. Terry says, we have DevOps in some parts of the organization and not in others. Challenged with our IT service management processes, supporting both effectively and minimizing confusion. Any insights or advice?
Again, another great question, because I think we're seeing a lot of that in organizations where, again, be careful of the term using DevOps or applying DevOps or having DevOps, because, you know, unlike other frameworks, this really touches every aspect of IT. But we do see DevOps programs rising up in specific business units or product ownership or parts of the business and not necessarily parts of others. And then you have a process like enterprise change management that's trying to manage across that. I think that when we start to look at IT service management in particular and how it engages with DevOps, and I'm not sure if that's the underpinning question here, but I'll ask and answer it anyhow, is we start to look at some of the processes that are engaged in traditional continuous delivery, like change and release, and start to look at how we scale those up or down depending on the needs of the organization. So for example, in change management, I think being able to look at and review your definition of a standard change, all right? So in a DevOps environment, standard change may be a change or a release that's starting, you know, very quickly at one end of that pipeline and continuing through the deployment and beyond. And any change that's automated and has, you know, a proven test plan built into it or whatever could now be defined as a standard change that could get documented and reviewed afterwards. So there's ways to adapt, you know, key processes like change management or release management. You know, as I said before, probably one of the most misunderstood ITSM processes, and start to readapt your release management process for those units that are automating and leveraging release automation. So you look at those two key pieces. And then at the other end of it, I would certainly look at service level management, right? How do we kind of graduate some service level management and SLAs, and what the definition of a service level requirement. In site reliability, they're starting to call them SLOs, site reliability objectives. That terminology is becoming much more common, and figuring out how those processes can be adapted. So you can keep the standard, right, your standard process in place, and then you can build branches specifically for those that are attempting to apply many more of the DevOps practices. And then, again, proof of concept in one business unit hopefully starts to become viral and transfers into another one.
Thank you, Jayne. Terry said, thank you. That's similar to our approach. So that's good reinforcement for them. So thank you for that. Yes. I don't have any other questions at the moment. So this is your opportunity. If you have anything else that you'd like to ask of Jayne, please let us know now. Thank you very much. And once again, I'd just like to remind everybody that the next webinar is scheduled for Thursday, April 20th, when Perry Stratham with IBM's Reliability Engineering Group is coming in, and his presentation is Site Reliability Engineering, an Enterprise Adoption Story. And we'll send you an invitation for the next webinar, and we'll look forward to having you join us. And I don't have any other questions, Jayne. Thank you again, Jayne, very much for your time. As Eric said, we know how busy you are, and we appreciate you coming in and sharing this information with us.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure.